Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Town of Oakville's Council. And let me see, I don't believe we have any regrets this evening. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, we have none. Let's find out if they're ready to play O Canada for us. I see a nod. So I invite everybody to rise and join council in singing O Canada. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Now, Council, are you ready to confirm the minutes of the previous council meetings of February 27th and 26th and the Planning and Development Session Council of March 19th? Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Duddick, all in favor? And the minutes are confirmed. Let's see. Council, look, it's Regional Councillor Mike Cluett from the town of Milton, our northern neighbors, and he's here to make a presentation on behalf of the United Way. He is a cabinet member of the United Way, and we should ask him what it cost him to get that post. Good evening, Mr.
Good
Cluett.
evening, Your Worship and members of council, and absolutely, it's a pleasure to do this cabinet job for free, and I urge all of you as we get towards our next campaign and our next campaign goal to join me in this free amount of service and public support for the United Way. So as you all already do, I'm just kidding there. But thank you very much, Your Worship. As we've spoken before, I'm going to try to keep this as brief. I know you have a pretty heavy schedule, so I want to keep the good news as quickly as possible. But last month, the United Way of Halton and Hamilton, we announced that we reached our goal. We had an ambitious goal of $10 million, and as many of us were picked up off the floor with that amount, we announced recently, and many of you were there at the event, where we reached $10,052,000. So that is the first of our main goals for our amalgamated organization, and many thanks goes to the employees and everybody else who donated. So for those who were there and participated, thank you very much. The impact on our communities, I think, is going to be outreached by far of what we've ever done before. All the money that was raised in Oakville will remain in Oakville for the Oakville agencies as well. So it's going to be a fantastic, now we're going to go through that part of divvying up the money to all the great organizations that the United Way supports. So part of my job, and I was here before, I wanted to thank the employees of the town of Oakville for their outstanding efforts and generosity to help make this achievement possible. This year, the Town of Oakville campaign raised over $95,000, and that's a 10% increase over the campaign results of last year. So if you are not so comfortable in your seats, you can give yourself a big round of applause for that. It is a 10% increase. It's $95,000, and it all stays in this local community. and we're just so excited about that, and so I wanted you to be excited about it. I want to publicly thank the staff campaign chair, Neil Gallant, and Jane Latter-Hutchinson. Neil is in the gallery here today. Countless hours of work put in for your Town of Oakville employee campaign, and the entire team of staff, committee members, and canvassers for their hard work and dedication to keep and execute this campaign that engaged their colleagues. So this year, some of the new initiatives to help fuel the campaign growth was the Oakville Fire Sparky in the Park events. There was the Canada 150 United Way Cafe, and one of my favorites, the Ford Test Drive event, just to name a few. And the campaign was successful because every town department this year in the town of Oakville participated. They got involved from the Oakville Fire, Transit, Finance, IT, Planning. Employees across this organization participated, and who are also generous in their personal pledges to support the campaign. And your generosity is both in time and funds, is helping to ensure that the safety net of supports that will be available to us when we are faced with one of life's many challenges. So, Your Worship and Member of Council, again, thank you very much. We are very excited about our first campaign goal reaching its 10 million. We're looking forward to next year, and we're looking forward to working with your staff and your employees throughout the next coming year for Oakville, the United Way, Halton and Hamilton's next campaign. And Meredith wanted to make sure that we brought a check to show you the actual amount of $95,000. Folks over there. Oh. Good stuff. Thank you very much. Once again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cluett. And we'll see you at council.
Absolutely.
So that I don't confuse anybody, Councillor Cluett is a member of the Regional Council of the Municipality of Halton, as are half of us here on this council, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks very much.
As always, thank you.
Now, Council, in accordance with Section 3.21 of the Procedure Bylaw, and out of a spirit of kindness, I think we should take up the Oakville Enterprises update first, rather than make them wait through what could be a long discussion about another matter. So with that, I would like to call to the podium the president of Oakville Enterprises, Mr. Rob Lister. Welcome. We look forward to you. Usually good news.
All right, how come I can't see the icon?
You need help full screening this?
Yeah.
Not a problem.
Where is it?
There's a few ways to do it. You can do it like this, and if you want to go complete full screen mode.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. Thank you very much for the opportunity for us tonight to come and provide another update on Oakville Hydro and Oakville Enterprises. This evening with me, I have a number of my staff. I have Scott Moody, who's Chief Operating Officer of Energy and Infrastructure. I have Mike Brown, who's Chief Operating Officer of Oakville Hydro. Mary Caputi, who is Vice President of Innovation and Growth. Tessa Schellenberg, who is our Manager of Marketing and Communications. I have Doug Walton, who is our Vice President of Business Development. Sean McCaughan, who is our Chief Financial Officer. Simon Abbott, who's our VP of Human Resources. Is that everybody? That's everybody. Yeah. So I'm going to ask Tessa to come up and run through the update, and then when she's finished, be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you. Tessa?
Thank you, Rob. Good evening, Mayor Burton, council members. I'm very pleased to bring you the first quarter update of 2018 for OEC. So I'm briefly going to highlight some of our local LDC operations, go over some customer and community initiatives, give an update on safety and sustainability, and give you guys a little bit of information about a new acquisition that we've made. Start with some good news here. On March 26th, Oakville Hydro was very pleased to be the recipient of the EDA's LDC Performance Excellence Award. This is a very prestigious award for LDC's companies recognizing their achievements in 5 categories: health and safety, conservation and demand management, operational excellence, financial operations, and of course, contributions to the community. As of February, we've already achieved 70% of our 2020 conservation goal. We're sitting at 64.4 gigawatt hours conserved of our 92.6 gigawatt hour goal. As a sponsor of the Oakville Awards for Business Excellence, Mary Caputi was privileged to provide the Oakville Hydro's Conservation Leadership Award to the Canlan Ice Sports Oakville. There were 4 other nominees in this category who also included Iovate Health Sciences, Mancor Industries, Honda Oakville, as well as Pinty's Delicious Foods. Oakville Hydro's reliability continues to rank among the top tiers provincially and nationally. This past year, customers only experienced a 0.8 interruption. During the interruption time lasted less than 30 minutes, and 11% of that interrupted time was a result of scheduled ongoing maintenance. Across the town, we currently have several construction projects. I'll highlight 2 of the larger ones. Around Cedar Grove Boulevard, Poplar Drive, and Burgundy Drive, as well as Morrison Road, Cornwall Road to Lakeshore Road East, we currently are doing grid investment projects, replacing overhead primary and secondary wires, power poles, as well as transformers as part of our ongoing asset management plan. Unfortunately, we had an unexpected repair on March 15th, when unfortunately a vehicle accident resulted with a transport truck coming into contact with a power pole and high voltage circuits. Thanks to the quick yet safe response of our team, we were able to restore the site within 6 hours without any interruption to our customers. Severe weather in the state of New York left millions of residents without power. On March 9th, Oakville Hydro was contacted to send an operations team to assist in restoration. From March 10th to the 11th, our team went just outside of Rye, New York, to the areas of Corydon-on-Hudson and Scarsdale areas to provide outage restoration services. During the week of March 19th, in anticipation of more inclement weather, we were contacted again to send another team. Thankfully, the weather was not as poor as predicted, and our team was released before conducting any work. Community involvement is really important to the staff at OEC and especially Oakville Hydro. This winter, we were able to participate in a few community initiatives, trading in our dress shoes for bowling shoes and curling sliders for the Big Brother, Big Sister Bowl for Kids' Sake, as well as the Curl for Kids' Sake. Our health and safety team were also able to be at the Sheridan Housing Fair, providing electrical safety knowledge to the students there. On February 9th, Oakville Hydro wrapped up its e-billing campaign. We provided an incentive to customers of a $10 donation to the Oakville Hospital Foundation for each customer that switched from paper to e-billing. During this campaign, we saw 1,477 customers switch, giving Oakville Hydro the privilege to provide a check for $14,477 to the Oakville Hospital Foundation. We currently now have 21% of our customers on e-billing. On March 24th, Oakville residents conserved power for an hour as part of Earth Hour. During this time, we saw electricity demand decrease by just over 3%, the equivalent of 5.9 megawatts, which is equal to turning off 390,000 LED light bulbs for over an hour. So thank you, Oakville residents, for your participation. Bit of a safety and sustainability update. We're very proud of our affiliate, PVS Contractors, who recently were recognized by the Infrastructure, Health and Safety with the President's Award. This award acknowledges 1 million hours worked with no lost time incidents. Prevention is always the best medicine, and our staff at the Oakville Hydro office were able to participate in a preventative Staying Alive heart check, which provided a heart checkup for our staff on site. Moving into sustainability, in 2017, the OEC company recycled over 5,700 kilograms of batteries, 25,000 cans of paint, and over 9,000 kilograms of paper. We're also very pleased to announce that our Oakville Hydro site geo-exchange system is conserving approximately 1,000 kilowatt hours annually. Every 2 years, Oakville Hydro conducts a public safety survey. This survey provides a snapshot of our customers' electrical safety awareness. We're very happy that this year we scored an 83% on the public survey. This was a 3% increase from when we conducted it in 2016. This average was also slightly above the other 33 LDCs that also participated in the survey. Though we're very pleased with the scores, there's always much room for improvement when it comes to electrical safety awareness. Another survey that Oakville Hydro completes annually is the customer satisfaction survey. We're very pleased with the score that customers gave us, providing us an A grade compared to the national B+ and provincial B grades. We're very thankful to the customers that took the time to participate in this survey, and we look forward to providing more customer service enhancements to continue making their experiences with Oakville Hydro a positive experience. Lastly, OEC recently acquired a hydroelectric generation station just right around Trout Creek, just south of North Bay. This site has 2 generating stations with a generation capacity of 2.7 megawatts, just further enhancing OEC's green power generation portfolio. And that concludes our first quarter update. I welcome any questions you have for my colleagues or me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Council, do you have questions? Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Just one question would be, with regard to Earth Hour, is it trending up or down over the last few years? I'm just curious.
Through your mayor, Councillor Elgar, that's a wonderful question. We did conserve 3.7% last year, and this year experienced 3.2%. So it is moving downward, but we see that Oakville is still one of the towns that is very much involved in their conservation efforts during this event.
I thank you for that, because I didn't hear as much about it on the radio or anything this year, and I just wondered whether it's kind of, we need a bit of a hype, some new hype to make people aware of it again. So thanks very much. And thanks for the presentation.
Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Tessa, and nice to meet you. I don't have a question for you specifically, but I wonder, since Mr. Lister is here, a question regarding the partnership with the new Southeast Oakville Community Centre. I understand that there will be a partnership with respect to the distributed energy resources. There's a mention regarding the environmental aspect of that. Will there also be fiscal savings regarding the electrification of the building and the greenhouse targets that are in here with the geothermal?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the geothermal geo-exchange system will be where the most greenhouse gas savings are found, and so that's a very energy efficient way to heat and cool the structure.
So percentage-wise, is it 5% more efficient or 10, or hard to say?
Ask the expert. Got a number, Scott?
Yeah, it's about 20% more efficient, but so we'll use more electricity, but we'll use less or no fossil fuels, right? So, and from an economic standpoint, it'll be equal to what you would be paying in a traditional system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question on the slide with respect to the truck hitting the pole and coming down. Just a question, personal, do we get full cost recovery on when we have accidents like that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good answers. Thank you very much, Mr. Lister. Council, if you're done your questions, then Councillor O'Meara moves receipt. Councillor Grant seconds. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everybody. Now, I'd like to ask you to turn to the Committee of the Whole report, the Standing Committee and Committee of the Whole reports. The Standing Committee, Community Services, recommended that that the report be approved subject to separation of item 5, the flood mitigation progress report. And they wanted to refer that to the full council. Councillor Hutchins?
Move that copy approved.
Thank you. Is there a second for the balance of the CSC report? Councillor Lischina, all in favor? The balance of the CSC report is adopted. Item 5, to whom, Mr. Green, do we turn?
Well, perhaps Mayor Burton, I'll lead off on the discussion. As council is aware, the lake levels were at the highest they have been in, I believe, something in the order of about 100 years. There we go. And so I'll just repeat, the lake levels in last year were the highest that they've been in almost 100 years. And as a result of the high water, there was considerable damage along our lakefront and also within the 16-mile creek. The lake levels didn't recede until very late in the fall, and it wasn't until the end of the year that we're able to complete assessments as to what the total damage that had occurred down there. And since the beginning of the year, we've been working with the various regulatory agencies on what work could be achieved this year in terms of working in the water and the various constraints with respect to fisheries and those issues that we would be up against this year. We have determined the critical work that should be done, and we have provided estimates in the report and recommended funding through the capital reserve. Phil will walk you through a presentation to highlight the various areas that we're looking at, and following that, John from Financial Operations will speak to our MDRAP application as to the potential of recoveries, which, given the rules that go with it, are not very likely. However, we don't know, still even to this date, the full extent of the damage that occurred. As well, these levels are forecasted to be high again, perhaps not as high as last year, but we have a team that meet on a bi-weekly basis to look at the lake levels and things that we should be getting ready to do. In fact, Chris Mark was saying to me about a week ago, you may even see some early sandbagging being done, so that if there's need to sort of mitigate things before they get to the worst, it's better to get out there early. So with that, I'll turn it over to Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. As highlighted, I'm here to give you an update of the flood mitigation report. It's an update number 3. I also bring you regrets from Commissioner Colleen Bell and Chris Mark. Chris Mark prepared this presentation. However, he was scheduled to be out of town this week, so I hope I can do his presentation justice. So as mentioned, this is flood mitigation update report number 3. So this is a third in a series. 2 earlier reports were brought towards council in May and September 2017. The current report that is before you tonight highlights our assessment and identification of required 2018 capital projects and repairs. We provide an update on the Municipal Disaster Recovery Assistance Program application, as Mr. Green mentioned, and a little bit of an update on current lake levels and possible concerns for 2018. As Mr. Green highlighted, in 2017, we saw the highest lake levels that we had seen since 1918. So what we basically had was the 100-year lake level. And when you have these high lake levels combined with the eastern winds, our shoreline suffered considerable damage in 2017. In response to that, we put together a multidisciplinary or multi-department team to manage our response to the high lake levels and the damage. The town also retained a coastal engineering firm to provide input to town staff, and we got input late last year. And now the assessments that you see are going to be brought before you tonight. Just to recap, so why did we have high lake levels last year? When I look at what the International Joint Commission, sort of their executive summary on it all, is we had an unusually mild winter last year. There was also record high inflows from the upper Great Lakes system to Lake Ontario. There was a record-setting spring freshet in the Ottawa River Basin Valley. And then in the Lake Ontario Basin and St. Lawrence River system, there were high rainfall events that also contributed to the high lake levels. So, for example, in the GTA here in April and May last year, we had about 250 millimeters of rain. The standard for that April-May time period is roughly 125 millimeters. Now, with respect to specific funding requests, so as outlined in a September 2017 report to Council, we advised that we would report back at a later time on the financial impacts of the high lake levels once they were better known. So much of the assessment work to determine what damage was actually done to the lake and the costs and scope of work required to fix, that was done in November and December 2017 and the earlier parts of 2018 after the capital budget was prepared, hence the reason for the report tonight. So the overall funding request that you have before you is just shy of $3.8 million, and it's broken down in the broad categories on the slide before you. With respect to some specific parkland restoration projects, so on this slide, the cost here on this slide is a subsection of the $3.8 million that you saw on the earlier slide. What Mr. Mark wanted to point out here was that all these projects, the intent is to construct all these projects in 2018 to get the public open spaces back open to the public, with the exception of the Gerlach Garden seawalls, the $575,000 item there, the third from the bottom. That project will be designed this year, but it won't be constructed until 2019. We're going to take you down memory lane a little bit, just to show you some photographs of the high lake levels and the resulting impacts on some of our park systems. So we have Coronation Park photographs. We have some photographs of Gerlach Gardens, both looking, standing at the shoreline, looking inland, and then looking out to the lake. The lower left there is one of the pathway washouts. This is Lakeside Park. This is about a good section of retaining wall that needs to be reconstructed. One of the financial items in the report was about $484,000 for harbor repairs. That included certain dock rebuildings, brackets, whalers. Whalers are actually the top part of the sheet pile retaining walls that need to be reconstructed. There's some boardwalk work, some waterline work, power pedestal work, and actual seawall work. And then, as mentioned earlier, there's also about $770,000 to repair the Bronte Harbor launch ramp. There's some photographs of Bronte Harbor showing you how it looked under the high lake levels, and some additional photos. Some of the other repairs that are also underway, Water Street behind the Performing Arts Center was inundated for much of last summer, or spring and summer, and is in needed some reconstruction, so that's planned for later this year. One repair that has already been completed, it was completed in record time from identification to completion in about 4 weeks last year, was Lakeshore Road at 4th Line. The actual integrity of Lakeshore Road was threatened, and we mobilized the contractor in short order and our good friends at Conservation Halton. And by the end of August, we had works in place to stabilize the area, and staff are currently working on a long-term permanent solution as part of a Lakeshore Road environmental assessment that's ongoing. I'm going to hand the mic over now to Jonathan, who will give you an update on the application at hand.
Good evening, everybody. Oh. Do you want to take those right away? No. Okay. I just have one slide for you. Just want to provide you an update on the Municipal Disaster Recovery Assistance Program run by the Province of Ontario. 2 items to highlight for you. One relates to costs, and the other relates to our actual claim with the ministry. In terms of costs, at the end of February, we had $640,000 of incurred costs. We do use a separate account to track these costs. That is one of the requirements from the ministry. We also have the items laid out for you in the report today that include $3 million in flood-eligible costs. It's a little bit different than the total number. There are some costs that would not be eligible for provincial funding if we get there. And that leads to the second point, the status of the claim. Just so everybody is aware, we did file our claim with the ministry on September 1st of last year. They have come back and asked for more documentation, specifically regarding engineering reports. And they've also asked that as we incur additional costs that we provide them on a regular basis what those costs are. Currently, we just have estimates in with them. Just also to remind everybody that in order for us to be eligible under this program, we would need to spend, or we would need to incur $5.25 million in costs. And that number is based on a specific formula, so every municipality has a different number, but that's the number that we would need to hit in order for them to even consider our application. That's all I have. I'll turn it back to Philip.
Thank you, Jonathan. Just to close off, some of the final items I'm going to touch on is our interdepartmental team keeps meeting on a regular basis just to monitor what's happening with the lake levels this year. So currently, we get updates weekly from the International Joint Commission, which includes both the current lake level and a forecast looking forward. So currently, the lake is about 150 to 200 millimeters lower than at this time last year. And it's not currently causing flooding. It is above the historic long-term averages, but it is lower than it was last year. So our full response team will, if we need to activate it again, we will. We're going to be focusing on the completion of the restoration projects identified in tonight's presentation and in the report. And our park staff had also made some adjustments to licensing park spaces and special events, such as the Children's Water Festival, I think, has moved to the QE Park, where it actually worked quite well last year. So they've made some management changes to the park systems as well. So with that, I thank you. And if there's any questions, myself, Jonathan, and Rakesh from Parks and Open Space is also here.
Well, you've hit the jackpot. You've got lots of questions. And Councillor Duddick will lead off.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Out of interest, have we compared ourselves to some of the neighboring municipalities in terms of the financial impact or the amount of impact on our shoreline compared to theirs? I'm thinking Mississauga, Burlington.
So anecdotally, from the coastal engineer that we work with, who works all along the Lake Ontario waterfront, the further east you go, like when you get out to Oshawa, Whitby, Clarington, they got hit harder than we did. So proportionally, I think their damage is higher than ours. Financially, in terms of financial budget implications, I don't have any other input. I don't know if Jonathan, if you do.
I'm not aware of any other.
Just wondered out of interest for you know, what ours was in comparison to others. And has anybody been paid out by the province thus far? And if so, who?
I believe that there are 3 smaller municipalities. I'm looking right now if they were in the report, but I believe there are 3 smaller ones, the names of which I didn't even recognize.
Okay, so they may not be a considerable amount that they were impacted. And given that we're facing climate change issues now going forward, and what Mr. Green had referenced at the onset of the presentation, are we looking at being proactive in terms of maybe introducing some groins or break walls where we didn't have them before, or they may have sort of gone by the wayside? I'm thinking of places like Applebee's restoring their area in front, and some of their break walls and that had sort of succumbed to wear and tear. Is there anything we're doing to be proactive in terms of minimizing the impact?
I'll answer through you, Mayor Burton. So at this time, the focus is on repairing the damage that has been done. As time goes on, a lot of our shoreline is currently armored, and it currently has a certain lifespan. So, for example, coming up shortly, possibly later this year, if not early next year, the Shelburne Promenade in southwest Oakville has been undergoing design for the last few months. So the coastal engineer doing that design has seen the destruction that the high lake levels caused from one end of Ontario to the other. So he said he's actually, tweaked his design practices to make his designs even more resilient.
Okay, so then obviously going forward, every time we do the sort of ongoing maintenance of a shoreline area, we're incorporating something at that time, as you say, through their plans or whatever.
Yes, within the limitations of the approvals process that we can do. It's just like if structural engineering advances, we don't rip out a bridge that's only 20 years old.
Exactly.
We'll wait.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple quick questions and to see the dollar values associated to these projects. And I guess where I have a concern, let's use Coronation Park, because Coronation Park is water level, it's almost below water level in some spots at Coronation Park. Is this basically a cleanup, or is there some type of engineering where we'll have that opportunity to stop water coming into the park?
So the work in general in Coronation Park and elsewhere is a repair of existing shoreline works and pathway works. If by chance and in some cases there's some features that would be designed in to maybe minimize water intrusion in the future. In general, what we had was the 100-year water levels. So in general, if the 100-year water levels were to hit again, we would still have some flooding of the waterfront parks. It's just a simple law of physics and elevation.
That's the point I'm making. I think what the community needs to realize is that it's not necessarily 100% foolproof with respect to design or whatever we're doing at Coronation Park. It will happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen for another 100 years, but that has to be the message, is that it's not guaranteed it's going to be completely dry.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my assumption is that the fences and the hoarding will stay in place to protect the public from accessing the shoreline and structures until the work is complete?
I believe the answer to that would be yes. I believe they're also being inspected on a regular basis just to make sure they're not being deconstructed, shall we say, to allow access.
And the work that's being done, it is structural. It's not like in the spring we fill potholes. This is replacing structure and rebuilding areas of the shoreline.
Correct.
Originally, we had a June-ish target for commencing work on these projects. Is that still in the cards?
So first and foremost, we need the funding approved to formally award anything.
Right.
So, and before we can actually award anything, we need to tender it. Before we tender it, we need the budget amounts locked up for. So June is probably the earliest that some of the works could start. There are some some of the minor works, we've already submitted applications to Conservation Halton, had discussions with them, where we're doing fairly simple sketches. And so some of those works, I think, can probably commence in June, subject to the tendering process going smoothly.
Would these projects be able to be done concurrently, or is it specialized enough work that it has to go from project to project?
Good question. So one of the concerns we have as a town, and probably all municipalities along the waterfront has, is the capacity of the consulting industry, because there's not too many coastal engineers out there, and the capacity of good quality contractors to do shoreline-based work. So there's, over the next 1 to 3 years, there's going to be an above average amount of work. So it's probably going to create a backlog. And depending on which, we don't know which end of the curve we're on yet. A lot of the stuff that we're doing currently is not the most complex. A lot of the stuff in here, it's relatively simple work. But some of the larger projects do require specialized work and specialized qualifications.
No, I understand. Some of them, for example, the trail has to be moved away from the water's edge, for example, so it's not difficult, but you have to replace the structure. You'd mentioned that looking at completion in 2018 for enjoyment in 2019, that's what triggered that question. So the hope is to be in there pre-summer and get done what we can?
Yes, yeah, for the parkland restoration projects, they want to get in as soon as they can in 2018 and finish the work in 2018. The one project we know that will not be done in 2018 is the Gerlach Garden seawall.
Right.
That one will be designed in 2018, but won't be possible to construct it until 2019. The intent of the other 6 or 8 projects on the table was to have them all done in 2018.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship. The Metro Marina building that was underwater for quite some time, did that sustain any damage, or is there any work that has to be done on that building in Brony Harbor?
I'll look to Rakesh to see if there's any insight he can add.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. Through you, Mayor Burton. The Metro Marine building did have some water damage around the base of the building. We had water breach over the north seawall by the building, and it stayed there for the duration until the water subsided. So there is some damage to the Metro Marine building.
And is that is there any urgency to that, or is that part of the 2018 funding to take care of that, or is that not going to happen this year?
The budget for the Marina building is being reviewed separately as part of the other mitigation measures for that same building as part of the current structural upgrades for that building. So they will be addressed at that time.
Okay, thanks. And the last question, I know there was some danger and some safety issues when that exact same area, the north seawall, was breached, and the pedestals that had the power to them had to be cut off. When we go in and we redo that, are we anticipating that may happen again? Are we getting sort of the safest stuff so that we don't have to worry about electricity and water mixing again?
We are upgrading our pedestals very slowly on a timely basis. As the new pedestals are being installed, they're being raised slightly off the existing whaler, so that we're anticipating that should the high water levels come up again, that our electrical connections are safe and secure for our users.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you.
Councillor Hutchins? No. Councillor Robinson?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, this was an unexpected, unbudgeted catastrophe, an expensive one. But as a result of everything that we've been talking about and hearing about, and all this money that's been spent, and maybe more to be spent that wasn't expected to be spent, did we end up with any sudden improvements or benefits from what happened as a result of having to remedy the problems? Do you understand the question?
Not totally. So did we get any sudden improvements?
Well, all of
Can
a
you
sudden,
clarify?
we spend a lot of money to fix things that were damaged. Did the end result of that remedial work, in fact, even make it better than it was before? Do we add any new features, new stuff that we didn't have or weren't planned to do?
So we haven't added any new stuff or new features yet. When we do undertake the work, some of the works that will be constructed will incorporate some newer features which should increase the safety and integrity of the works going in. After all, some of the works that were damaged were 20, 30 years old, and some of the works going in are going to be brand new and designed with a little bit more knowledge.
Which would be a benefit.
Correct.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Mr. Green?
Thank you, Your Worship. In addition, that is one of the concerns certainly with NDROP when they look at restoration costs. They will be looking at, because at the end of the day, there will be some areas that the shoreline was built 30, 40 years ago to a completely different standard. Building it today, as Councillor Robinson said, we'll be building it to a modern standard. So when NDRAP looks at the final cost, if there have been improvements above what we had before, they would not include that as part of our funding envelope. So coming out of this is just like an accident with your car. It'll be completely rebuilt, and you know, it'll be good for another 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Councillor Lischina?
I had a lot of the same questions, so thank you very much, Mr. Kelly, for answering those. I guess my one question that's left is, you had mentioned about specialized construction companies doing this type of work. Are you confident in the numbers given here to be able to do that type of work?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So all the majority of the estimates we have so far for the hardcore coastal engineering work have been provided by our coastal engineering consultant. So yes, I'm confident we should be able to get them done for the stated prices.
Thank you very much for all the detailed and exhaustive information. Council, is there a mover and seconder to receive the information and approve the expenditures? Councillor Elgar, Councillor Chisholm, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, everybody. Do we have a mover and seconder for the Administrative Services Committee report? Councillor Knoll, Councillor O'Meara, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is adopted. Council, I invite your attention to item number 1 on the agenda, the notice of extension of time for regional decision on the town-initiated official plan amendments 15, 317, and 318, the urban structure review, and the official plan amendment 16, the cultural heritage policy updates. I would ask for a mover and seconder for this time-sensitive matter. Councillor Elgar and Councillor Duddock, all in favor, and that is approved. Council, item 2 calls your attention to an improvement to the outstanding issues list, and I need a motion and a second to receive it. Councillor Chisholm, Councillor O'Meara, all in favor, and that carries. Thank you. Now, let me see. I wonder if you are willing to, Councillor Knoll, I'm wondering if we'd like to take up and dispatch the library motion, or if this is just notice for the next council meeting.
It is notice for the next council meeting, but I'd be certainly happy to have it approved this evening if that is convenient.
Council, are you of a mind to pass it tonight? Could someone give, I need a mover and seconder to waive the procedure bylaw to take it up tonight. That would be Councillor Adams and Councillor Elgar, all in favor. The bylaw is waived, and it's now moved by Councillor Knoll, seconded by Councillor Grant. I wonder if you gentlemen would like to speak to your motion. I think it'd be helpful for the folks at home. This is an informative motion, and I think it'd be very good if we shared it with the folks at home. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. Let me just pull it up here so I can refer to the specific clauses and draw some attention to them. I think one of the things that is most obvious to members of council and to the public every time we do our citizen satisfaction survey and we hear from our constituents is the general level of satisfaction, appreciation, and pure joy that the residents of Oakville get from their library programs and facilities. The one thing that has become very much apparent to us is that funding in order to achieve some of the I guess the technological improvements and some of the new innovative things that are happening in libraries, which we've witnessed with respect to recent renovation in Ward 6 of the Iroquois Ridge Library, which everybody's enjoying, is that those are very expensive improvements. And we really have not had substantive funding changes from the province in a long time in order to help us offset some of these costs. So this resolution really is an opportune moment in time because we have this little thing coming up in June and we want to draw some attention to our provincial leaders of the importance of looking at additional funding for libraries in Ontario and for us here locally in the town of Oakville. You'll note some of the very interesting statistics in the report. In addition to the satisfaction survey, 47% of our residents, which is an incredible number of our residents, actually hold library cards. And those card holders and even non-card holders account for 1.3 million visits per year to our library. So it's a very substantive service that we offer. Our staff provide some amazing services, and I think that with some additional funding, from the province, and in addition to, of course, we're expanding our development campaigns to actually get philanthropic donations from the community. I think the combination of all of those things, without putting additional burden on the residential and commercial taxpayers here in Oakville, would really benefit the overall community by leveraging our partners at the province. So we ask for your support to approve this motion so we can send it to the province and attempt to take advantage of this amazing season that we have coming up and potentially get this on the agenda and really moved up on all the parties' platforms.
Thank you, Councillor Noel. Councillor Grant?
Well, just to dovetail on that, I think any of us who've had children or grandchildren enjoy the reading programs that there are at the library. And as we look forward and think about what a library can be in the future, imagine the benefits that children will have using 3D printers, being able to learn how to program, build robots. And we really are facing a time in our future of the library where we need to get these programs, not just at Iroquois Shore, but in every library that we can. Pardon me. So I certainly, in supporting this, would also ask that you support and get the message out to the province for the silly season coming up.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Shall I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carries unanimously. Now, Council, we have a late-breaking item not previously listed on the agenda, and that is to declare a Ward 4 Town Councillor seat held by Roger Lapworth vacant in accordance with Section 262(1) of the Municipal Act. Also, before you is I'll just read the rest of the staff recommendation. 2, that the vacant council seat be filled by means of an appointment to be made by council using ballots in accordance with the council vacancies procedure. 3, that nominees be required to include 25 declarations of endorsements with their nomination forms and supporting documentation. 4, that a special council meeting be held May 7th, 2018 to deal with filling the vacant seat representing the office of Ward 4 Town Councillor. And 5, that council predetermine 5 questions for the candidates to address in their submissions. And for the benefit of the public who may be curious, we're past the point where the law allows us to have a by-election, and we're before the point, which happens in late July, when we are allowed to leave it vacant. So, in the words of a very, very phenomenal lawyer friend of mine, Judy Wilson, who loves to say, when this applies, rejoice, you have no choice. It's going to be easier. You only have one choice from the menu, which is a point. So that's why we're not having a by-election. That's why we can't leave it vacant. So I'll open the floor for discussion. Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Burton. I get more clarification with regard to item, recommendation number 3, because this is something new that is going to come up in the election in the fall for all members of, or people running for council. When it says 25 declarations of endorsements with their nomination forms and supporting documentation, just so everybody says, can we get more clarification? Is that if a person is running in Ward 4, does the person then have to have the 25 declarations from Ward 4, or can they be from any ward in the municipal election also?
I'll turn to the clerk to correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, it's qualified electors in the town rather than in the ward. And good news, the form is for the fall, for the October election, we must use a form that's prescribed by the province, and they published it today.
Okay, so now we have it clarified. It doesn't matter for this nomination. That's going to be for the candidates that come forward. It can be anywhere in the town, and also for councillors' nominations that apply between the 1st of May and the end of July. Again, it's town-wide. Okay.
Well, I suppose it makes sense. Our duty is actually to the entire town rather than to the ward.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So that's good.
And that's the oath we swear.
So, next would be recommendation number 5. 5 questions. When do those questions have to be approved so that we can get things in motion for? I believe the first date anyone can apply is April the 13th, which sitting on April the 3rd right now doesn't leave a lot of time.
Well, as it happens, we've prepared a selection of questions for your consideration, and looking at it, you may think of others, or you may find 5 you like there. 5's an artificial number. You can make it 1 or 10 or any number, or none. You don't have to do it.
Do we have
the
questions?
I think it would be great if...
I didn't see them. Maybe I missed it. I don't know.
Well, you haven't seen them because they're sitting here.
Oh, that's why I
And
wouldn't have seen them yet. Okay.
There's also a news clipping from, so did we pass this out too? Okay. Oh, good. Great. So the news clipping that I passed out is very, very interesting, Council, because it indicates that our colleagues next door evidently had a public vote in that, the names of who voted for who is at the bottom of the story.
Well, that's not the way I read it at all. When I looked at the details in the nomination that went to February 21st Mississauga Council meeting.
I understand, but the newspaper reported councillors Carlson, McFadden, Sato, Mahoney, Starr, and Parrish voted in favor of Cook. Danahy received votes from councillors Ross, Fonseca, Kovac, Ianicha, and Mayor Crombie. So
quite different from what they put in the minutes of the meeting from February 21st, 2018.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
It is, because it became like a round robin of the last one drops off, and the clerk would give out ballots again and take a name off, and it kept going and going until it was done. I think the clerk, you looked at that today. You confirmed that is correct. I appreciate that. Now, also on their forms that the candidates had to fill in, they had to tick. There was 4 boxes they could tick off. And I note that on the first box was, I will not seek re-election for any office during the 2018 municipal election. And that was the first one where they would tick that off. Now, is that part of what we are doing, or is that outside of the bounds that we're going to go?
It's the will of council here. If council wills it that way, council can do that. The one thing that council can't do is, no matter what a person says, is hold them to it. They can run whether they tick it or not.
No, absolutely. I realize that. No, I appreciate that. So, Okay, now, I just want to know how our voting, maybe you can explain how that will work for this group of councillors? Do we put our hands up, or will there be a ballot given out where you can't have any markings on the ballot, similar to what Mississauga did?
We're proposing to do ballots.
Yes. Yeah, which is how they did it also in Mississauga. So that, to me, that does make sense. I appreciate that. I thank you. No, that's all I needed for clarification.
Okay. Other hands? Councillor Adams?
First of all, thank you for the suggested 10 questions. I wonder, do we have to have questions at all? Can we choose to have no questions? Is that I know that we've got a procedure that suggests we're going to have 5, but I might suggest that in 10 minutes that a candidate would have before us, they could easily address these questions, and I think they would, because they're quite general or generic, I'll say.
It's council's will. Council can choose how it wants to do this.
Okay.
You in fact.
That is my understanding.
So there's a couple things here. You don't even have to have a process. You can just appoint somebody. You know, your freedom to act is immense. You also need to decide whether you want to shape the 10-minute. If the applicants are going to give 10-minute pitches, you have to it's up to you by questions if you want to shape that or not. I mean, this is really a case where we have to decide what we want to do on these questions.
I understand that. If I were going to ask a question, I think the simple question I might ask is, would you support the strategic plan that this council has approved? But I think a candidate would probably tell us some version of that if they were going to apply. I took a look at some of the Mississauga stuff. I understand that each of the candidates had 5 minutes, not 10. And I understand that they were not prompted with any specific questions. They were asked a particular question about whether, or they were prompted in their application to answer whether they supported the former councillor's vision for the area. In our discussion, I think I prefer the broader approach of, do you support the Oakville vision that council's laid out? But again, I don't even think that's necessary. I think that is a natural thing that somebody would speak to given 5 or 10 minutes in front of council. The last thing I wanted to ask about is the balloting process. I understand that they had ballots, but each of the councillors had to sign the ballot that they ticked off the box on. So that may be how this news article ultimately got generated. I don't know. I understand that the councillors had to initial the ballots. So when I looked at their meeting, I understand that's what happened. Whether it's in the written procedure or not, that's, I think, what happened.
So let's help us understand what you just said, Councillor Adams. Did you screen the video of their meeting?
Yeah, I screened not the whole thing, I screened part of it.
But
so if I missed something, it's quite possible, but I think that's what I saw.
The part of which you were speaking?
Yeah, the part to which I was speaking was, I think they were giving out ballots. I think they were told that they had to initial them when they handed them back in.
Okay, Councillor Knoll is next.
Thank you, Worship. Maybe this is a question for the clerk, but I'm reading our own procedural bylaw, and the procedural bylaw refers to the fact that the members of council will vote by way of public vote. So I think my interpretation is unless we waive our own policy, then we have to do a public vote. We can't do a private ballot. The manifestation of how we vote would be, whether we do it on paper or by show of hands would be up to us, I guess, but it would have to be a public vote from the way I read this. Perhaps the clerk could help me with that?
Through you, Mayor Burton, our interpretation, we added ballots in only because there was really no definition of what a public vote was. You would be in open session, and whether you do it by show of hands or by ballots, that would be your choice.
Right.
I only defined it by ballots for a level of comfort for some.
Right,
But would the implication of that wording, though, by way of public vote, imply that our votes are public as opposed to being confidential? Because I mean, what would a public vote be if it's not voting in public? I mean, I don't understand how you could do secret ballot based on our own procedural bylaw. So that was my question. Thank you for the clarification. I just want to emphasize that I've got a unique experience that most of you don't have, as I actually ran for one of these vacancies back in 1999 when Kathy Graham was resigned to move on to her respective next career, and I and Fred Oliver and the fellow who won, and a number of others ran for the position. It was a public vote. The councillors simply raised their hands, and it was a little painful to watch. It wasn't so bad for me, but you know, it was a little painful to watch, but it worked very well. And we didn't have questions either. We simply prepared our text. Some of us, I know I spoke to some members of council, said, what would you like to hear? In terms of like, what are the questions you'd like me to answer? So I included those in my presentation. And in addition, what was interesting in that time, and Ralph probably remembers this because I don't think he voted for me though. I'm just kidding. I think that the other thing that was interesting was that councillors had a chance to ask us questions. So they had a chance to ask the candidates questions for the position. So maybe we should vote for a new sound system. Oh no, we already did that. So in summary, pardon me? Sure. Just so in summary, just to clarify what I was really trying to say is, one, I think we should be publicly voting. I think it should be clear who we're voting for. I don't care if we vote on paper or by hand. Two, I would agree that we shouldn't, I've heard some people suggest we shouldn't have questions. I think it'd be nice if we gave suggested questions. We publish those somewhere and say these are things you could talk about, but allow the candidates to frame their presentations the way they see fit. That's the way they would do it in all candidates meeting. That's the way they would do it if they're publicly campaigning. And the third piece is in terms of the, we sort of touched on, Councillor Elgar touched on this issue of should you run in the next election. If we were a year or so down the road and we could appoint somebody and they have a time to learn the job, maybe we could entertain that. But I think that the fact there's a couple months left. By the time we get this done, there's a few months left. Saying that they're getting any substantive, we're giving them an endorsement as a council because we're appointing them for the next election, I think is not realistic when you consider the amount of time we have left between now and the election. So I'd be in favor of just opening up to whoever wants to run, and let's see what happens. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn now to over here. I had a hand from Councillor Hutchins, then Councillor Robinson, and then Councillor Duddick has got hers higher than anybody else's. Councillor Hutchins and then Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. This 10 minutes has me slightly concerned. I mean, there were 23, I think, people. If there are 30 people turn up, that's a long time to sit and think. So is this a set time we have to go through? Or can it be, as you say, 5 minutes?
It's our bylaw. And as you did for Councillors Knoll and Grant's motion, you can waive your bylaw, you can amend your bylaw, but it's the platform from which you start. Councillor Robinson?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Everything that Councillor Knoll said is absolutely the way it went. He's described everything exactly the way we did it in 1999. And I'd just like to point out that the person that we did elect in public hand show in these council chambers was a young lawyer who was the past president of the Halton Multicultural Council. And he did a good job for a few months and then he disappeared.
He moved to Brampton, in fact. Councillor Duddick.
Just in response to Councillor Knoll's comments, I guess my concern is that, and the concern I've had all along with an appointment, is that the election of an individual should be done by the electorate. I really feel that shouldn't be something we do, but the process is such that we do have to appoint someone, And that's maybe where I have a bit of a, what shall I say, sensitivity to the fact that if the person is indicating they want to run, I'm a little leery of the fact they're getting a leg up over somebody else. And that's just my own personal opinion.
Right. Thank you, Councillor. Of course, just to clarify for the public, the person, whoever gets appointed, can't be compelled to stick to it and still has to face the voters no matter what. So now I have a second time list starting with Councillor Elgar.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I do think the town is going the same way that Mississauga has gone, and I understand what the clerk is saying about in Mississauga, it's same as what we're doing. Council shall vote on the appointment in open session. They're going to vote in open session. But when you go through the voting process for the appointment of the ward councillor, it's on ballots on an alphabetical order, and it's based on the surnames and if required forenames. And I just read one section to make it so people can understand. Under section C, members may vote for one nominee on any ballot by marking an X in the space provided to the right of the nominee's name on the ballot. Members may not make any other mark on the ballot, or it shall be considered spoiled and shall not be counted. Any unmarked ballot shall be considered spoiled and shall not be counted also. Any ballot that is marked so that it is not reasonably apparent to the clerk as to which nominee is being voted for shall be considered spoiled and shall not be counted. When all members present have cast their ballots, the clerk counts the ballots. When the ballots have been counted, the clerk shall provide the results to the chair, who announces the results. That's if there's a majority vote. If not, then we go one drop off the bottom and keep going. And I think that's where the clerk is trying to go with this. So, you know, and I think it's the right way and it's the fairest way for everybody. So, and as far as whether if you're going to run for election or not, based on the fact of what I'm hearing, that we can't make it legally an issue anyway, then maybe we should just let the people come up and speak, and they can tell us in the 10 minutes they have whether they think they will seek election in October or not, and keep it as simple as possible, because maybe they'll tell us things that we never thought to ask anyway. So why burden them with what we think is important? Let them tell us what they think is important.
All right.
So I keep it simple.
Okay. I thank you for that. We may actually be approaching some kind of agreement, I sense. Councillor Knoll?
Thank you. I want to thank Councillor Elgar for that comment. I think that's exactly where I was going with this, and I probably didn't articulate it as well as he did. I mean, I think for some of members of council, the issue of whether they will run again is an important issue. And if that's the case, then you know, maybe we ferret that out through either these stage questions or questions that are recommended, or for that matter, even if we ask questions after the fact, I'm not sure. But if that's important to you, it's not to me. But if it's important to you, then I think that information should be there. I have a further question, and that is, I'm very sensitive about the issue of private balloting on this issue. I know we're very sensitive about our in-camera annual reporting. We're very proud of the way we operate transparently as a council. I think you said recently we're the best, or we're amongst the top couple. I don't remember. I just think that this is a bad precedent to suddenly then go with the cone of silence again and vote privately on this. I agree that there'll be some people who are going to walk away disappointed, and there's 8 or 9 members that are running. Invariably, most people are going to figure it out anyway when they lose. I mean, if there's 8 people running, 7 are going to walk away disappointed. So there's going to be disappointment anyway, and that's the electoral process in general. I mean, that's what happens in the election process. Somebody's disappointed. But I do think that we need to be very sensitive to the fact that we hold very dearly our open and transparent conduct of our business in this council. And I think this suddenly was one of the last things we're going to do in the last few months. We're going to suddenly do it confidentially, when I'm not even sure that if it really meets the spirit of the municipal acts, things that we can do in camera. I know it's not technically in camera, but it's a private vote, so it sort of smacks of it a little bit. So I mean, at the end of the day, I'll be happy no matter what, as long as we get a new friend to sit beside me, and everything is great at the end of the day. But I do feel strongly that we should be voting for this openly.
All right. I have a suggestion. Oh, I'll wait for my suggestion. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Listening to all the comments with respect to this process, and I do agree with Councillor Noel, and I also agree with Councillor Algar. I'm just using my personal experience coming in a by-election for the 2 years, and even being a past employee of the town, the orientation and picking up what's happening takes considerable amount of time and energy, and it is complex. Not to say that, you know, I have some degree of background in the recreation department, but when you look at the whole sides of the town and what's involved, it is massive. And I think what we need to keep it simple based on the fact that this is only probably about 3 months. The orientation, the learning curve is going to be very limited, and so I am in support of Councillor Algar and Councillor Noel's suggestions. Thank you.
Alrighty, so based on what I've heard, let me float for you this. In what you've been provided, I suspect you would be comfortable with 1, 2, 3, and 4 and omit 5. Is that correct? And the way you'll tell me is if anybody puts up his hand and says, no, let's have 5. All right, Councillor Adams wants to move 1, 2, 3, and 4. Is there a seconder? Councillor Grant. Yes, you're going to get it. All right, it's moved by Adams, seconded by Grant. Any discussion? Councillor Knoll.
Can we clarify where this leaves us in terms of the ballot itself?
Yes. Here's what I would understand that to say. Now, you've often heard me speak about the classic Canadian solution to a dilemma. Was created in the conscription crisis in World War I, where the solution was conscription if necessary, but not necessarily conscription. Everybody should have learned that in high school, right? So I'm going to suggest that we start off as written here, which is consistent with the Mississauga approach. If it develops, as it may have done at Mississauga, that when they got to the event, they discovered there was some reason why they had to, show their votes, as Councillor Adams testifies he saw them do on the video, then we will have to be adults about it and do it that way. And so this is a kind of, this is a pure conscription if necessary, but not necessarily conscription solution to your dilemma. And in the alternative, we could separate this out and vote it up or down, but I would bet you any money that as written would prevail. That's just my sense of the room.
So just, again, just to go back to the clerk for a second, because maybe I wasn't listening carefully enough to her response. The policy where it refers to a public vote, we're interpreting that as being simply the fact that it's being done in open session as opposed to being publicly exposing the result of the ballot. I would appreciate if you could separate that piece of it, because I would like to support the idea of it being a public ballot or a divulged ballot.
All right, we will do that. Councillor O'Meara.
I know it was mentioned once, but I will bring it up again. I would be in favor of a 5-minute speaking term instead of 10-minute. So if we can separate that out, I would prefer that as well.
Let's take this one at a time. Moved by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Grant, that the office of Ward 4 Town Councillor held by Roger Lapworth be declared vacant in accordance with Section 262, Sub 1 of the Municipal Act 2001. May I put the vote? All in favor? Any against? Okay, number 1 is done. We got something done. Now, on the second one, that the vacant council seat be filled by means of an appointment to be made by council using ballots in accordance with the council vacancies procedure. Shall I put the vote? Apparently not. Councillor Adams.
So, as written, number 2 is not specific as to whether the ballots are intended to be kept confidential or not. recognizing the debate and discussion, let us include in this motion, then I'd like to amend it to provide an option that says that the ballots be made public. If council wishes not to have them public, we can vote that piece down, and then it'll be kept confidential, if that's the intent. And as I understand it, there's no regulatory requirement to do it in type A or type B. Is that correct?
I hear you. Councillor Adams wishes to amend number 2 to add words to indicate that council may, if it wishes, make the ballots, reveal who voted, reveal the ballots to show how people voted. Is that the essence of your amendment?
That is the essence of it.
And
and second, while I'm on the floor here, I'd like to, under 4.
No, we're only doing 2.
Okay.
Two
I
is
was gonna provide an option to do 5 minutes.
No.
Next.
No. No, so by our procedure, you're limited to what's on, we've broken it into pieces, we're doing number 2. And right now, what has the floor is your amendment, and it needs a seconder. Councillor Grant is seconding your motion, your amendment. Now, discussion, Councillor Knoll.
So, as I understand this, this is a decision, but not making a decision right now. We're basically saying we may choose to do it, we may not choose to do it. It's leaving it very gray at this point.
Those are his words.
And what would, and maybe to the mover, what would be the conditions on which we would decide to make it public?
No, my intent is that it's very specific to make it public.
Oh, I see. That's not the way the mayor repeated your motion.
I misunderstood that.
Yeah.
No, so I understand there are 2 positions here. It's pretty binary. It's either public or it's not. And I'm providing an amendment to make it public. And if that's not how we want to do it, then let's decide.
It's a great idea to settle it by voting on it, and I recognize the next speaker, Councillor Elgar.
And if there's any,
I was recognizing Councillor Elgar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Speaking to the amendment to the motion, I really thought we were going where the mayor was saying. We will probably take a look at Mississauga and let's follow their lead, which was just done on February the 21st, which I think is probably the most up-to-date in any municipality in Ontario. So I will not be supporting the motion put forward by Councillor Adams. I really feel we should take whatever steps Mississauga took. They've gone through it. They've had all the legal people look at it. I want to go the way they went. So I will not be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Other speakers? Shall I put the vote? No. Councillor Knoll?
Say no? Oh, okay. I thought you said I couldn't speak. So just with great respect to what Councillor Elgar said, and I do understand, that this is the way Mississauga did it, but again, if you want to talk about traditions and how it's been done, in my history, in the history that I'm familiar with within the town, I'm not familiar with another resignation and appointment, we did it by public vote. So I think if you're looking at, if you're looking to cleaving to a tradition, my opinion is that it's always better to do it the Oakville way than the Mississauga way.
I can't pull the choke chain on one of you and not on the other when you're trying to jump the queue. Councillor Adams.
So I said what I thought I saw on their video. I could be mistaken. I recognize Councillor Elgar's desire to know what Mississauga did, and it would be nice to know what Mississauga did. And I would be okay waiting to make this decision at the next council meeting when we know.
Okay. As worded, without an amendment, you get to make that decision if you need to when you get there, as you suggest they may have had to do, in that they seem to have made the vote public. The newspaper has the vote.
Yes.
So my conscription, if necessary, but not necessarily conscriptions, my suggestion was you're free to wait till then. And
so I suggest.
So is this you withdrawing your amendment?
So perhaps this is me withdrawing the amendment and substituting in something a little bit more specific than maybe, but not necessarily maybe. And, and so if I might suggest that we draft the...
Well, wait, let's dispatch your amendment.
I'm only trying to be helpful.
Okay. So,
I'll withdraw the amendment.
all right, Councillor Grant has agreed, and you're going to try again.
And I will try again with an amendment that says, and that staff provide information on the procedure used in the voting for the Mississauga appointment prior to council making the decision. So we have full information.
I could support that if it was a separate request for a report. But I don't want to support that for the action part of this resolution. While you chew on that, Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. In all honesty, I don't really care what Mississauga did. I don't want to vote in public because we don't ask our electorate to do it in public. And you're not choosing one person to appoint, you're choosing 10 other people you don't want to have sit with you. And I don't think that's a very good situation for anyone to be in who has to work with them. So it really doesn't matter to me what Mississauga did. I would prefer a balloted as required right here.
The point is that they set out in their written procedure to have their votes not be revealed, and wound up revealing them. And we don't know why. And so all I'm suggesting is that you hold open the possibility that you might discover that you have to too. The proposal is written as you're going down the road toward keeping them private. And you're just recognizing that when you get there, you're still a council, you still have the authority to change your rules. So let's see if our amendment is, what's happening with our councillor. Councillor Adams, what do you want to do?
Can I get some clarification as to what's intended or how number 2 as it's written is to be enacted?
We're going to be voting on.
I want to understand what the intention, when it says to be made by council using ballots, how are staff currently understanding that to mean that they're secret ballots not to be revealed publicly?
That's right.
Okay. And so if we discover at a later date that Mississauga did something different and the council wishes to have them revealed, what would be the procedure for this council to decide that it's going to have revealed ballots?
Bring a motion.
Would that happen on May 7th, or would that happen?
It can happen anytime you want, including up to the time you vote. Even, I imagine, after, well, no, not after, if you haven't marked your ballots with your names. So.
Then I'll let it go, and we can find out, and if the council wishes to change its mind, we can do it.
That's right. Council always has authority. I'm going to recognize Councillor Lischina.
I would like to make a motion that number 2 stands as it is here.
All right. Item 2 is moved by Councillor Lischina and seconded by Councillor Elgar. Shall I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any? We reached, we didn't quite reach unanimity. It carries, though, handle. It was close, Jeff. It was close. Number 3. Is there a mover and seconder that nominees be required to include 25 declarations of endorsements with their nomination forms and supporting documentation? Moved by Councillor Elgar. A forest of hands wanting to second. Let me choose Councillor Chisholm so that this side of the table gets in on the action. Let's see, you're on my left. You're the West. The West wants in. Anybody remember that campaign? Shall I put the vote? All those in favor? Number 3 carries. I think we reached unanimity that time. Number 4, that a special council meeting be held May 7th to deal with filling the vacant seat representing the office of Ward 4 Town Councillor. Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Giddings is moving and Councillor Hutchins is seconding. All those, shall I put the vote? All in favor? Any opposed? Well,
Your Worship. Your Worship.
Let me just declare the result of the vote.
No, because you didn't recognize me when you asked, are there any speakers?
Oh.
I wanted to include an amendment here for the 5-minute matter.
I have a solution for you.
Okay, then I'll wait for your solution.
I invite you to move a motion to add, well, let me dispatch 5 before I find out what number to give you. Is there a mover and seconder for item number 5? I sense that there wouldn't be. Okay, so would you like to bring a motion that we add a point number 5 to make the speeches 5 minutes? Is that what I understand you want to do?
Your Worship, sorry, point of order here. It's already in our bylaw on page 10. It says each of the candidates shall be afforded the opportunity to address council for a period of not more than 5 minutes. So it's already in there.
So in the procedure that governs this, it actually says 10. But we can, you know, these are our procedures, we can change them. So the motion is needed. Because you were the first, well, you weren't the first. You might have been the first. Would you like to second it or first it, or?
Sure, happy to second.
So Councillor O'Meara is seconding Councillor Adams' motion to have the speeches be 5 minutes on the 7th. Is there discussion? Shall I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries 2. Councillor Elgar.
One more thing is that I think you mentioned it, where asking questions of the candidate that speaks for the 5 minutes. Are we going to allow that, or they have 5 minutes and then we vote? I just so everybody's clear.
Would you like to float a motion to add number 6, which is that the candidates would be limited to their speeches and there would be no questions of the candidates?
I would so move that. I would be pleased.
Let's find out if there's a second. Is that Councillor Dudek seconding? Is there discussion? Would you like to vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Any opposed? There's an opposed. All right. So it was close, Dave. Councillor Knoll.
Can I just ask about the suggestion that was made, I think by a couple of us, to have the suggested questions maybe posted somewhere so candidates could prepare themselves? That could be staff direction, I guess, but I just, can we capture that?
Let's say, would you like to float a motion to add number 7?
Sure.
That the questions as provided by staff be provided to candidates to guide them in their submissions.
Yeah, I would suggest 1 to 9. I don't think I would suggest number 10.
Why not?
Okay. I just think it's overly political and unnecessary.
It's your motion.
Yeah, I think if somebody wants to tell us that, that's fine. I think it's overly political. I don't think it's necessary.
So
1 to 9.
1 to 9.
Yeah. And one other thing, we should start canvassing for dates for the new council photo now.
4 photos in 1 term. Councillor Knoll, do you have a second for your motion? Councillor Grant, is there discussion? Shall I put the vote? Adams, is that you discussing or voting?
Discussing. So is number 10 out? And would you include a different 10 as an amendment? Here's a suggested potential question, which is, yeah.
Yes. Support the strategic plan.
Do you?
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Adams moves to amend Councillor Knoll's motion by adding as number 10, do you support the council's unanimously adopted strategic plan? Do you have a second for that? Oh, Councillor Knoll is seconding it. Would you like to vote? Any discussion? All in favor? The amendment carries. Shall I put the vote on the main motion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, also carries. Well, it's been great working with you. Look at all we got. We made a whole bunch of decisions there. Now, is there any new business, a notice of motion, emergency congratulatory condolence? I don't see any. We dealt with that. Is there, Councillor Adams, do you still have, oh, we have a request for report here. Councillor Adams, do you still have a request for report? Okay. Then, Councillor Hutchins?
Yes.
So, Council, we need to give Councillor Hutchins our attention.
Since Dan Cozy and his people are not around to ask questions of, I'm going to withdraw this and present it at perhaps the next council meeting.
Good choice. All right. Is there a secretary for the Councillor China and Because we revised 2018-47 with the memorandum that was distributed to you, I'm just taking note for the record that that bylaw as listed in the agenda is as revised. Are you ready to vote? Shall I put the question? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are carried. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been a very good meeting. It's been terrific working with you. I thank you for your time and attention, and we are adjourned.